I sponsored Aspen Connect because I so believe in the importance of this conversation. You need to know what's going on, and you need to know that there are resources out there to help you. I was confronted with a life-changing decision. Our family was happy. We started noticing really gradually that he started pulling away a little bit. Things started changing. And then things really took a shift, and it went from just a gradual decline to spiraling out of control. I had seen on his phone that yet again he was buying drugs. That was his way of dealing with his anxiety and depression, substance abuse. And I went to confront him with it with tears streaming down my face and said to him, "We have no other choice. We're going to have to send you away." And he looked right through me as if I wasn't there. And he screamed and said awful things. But it was in that moment when he was telling me he would never speak to me again that I knew I had no other choice. The day he left, although I felt a momentarily sense of joy that I was saving his life, I almost immediately went dark. When you're so worried about your kid, all you can think about is taking care of them. And so what you stop taking care of is yourself. Until one day I woke up and I knew things had to change. And I walked outside and the sun was shining, and I started eating better, started exercising again, and I started living my life. After he finished his therapeutic boarding school, Eli came home. He slowly started transitioning back to life in his own way. The difference now was he had the self-awareness and self-compassion to know when he needed help and know what he needed as help. Parents, friends of friends started calling me for advice because of everything that we had gone through, and also because of my background as a holistic wellness coach. And that's when I decided that I wanted to open along their way a co-active mentoring program. We support families who have a child who's struggling in crisis or in treatment. Through the co-active mentoring model, I really try to support the whole self, mind, body, and spirit. If you're a teen, young adult, or parent out there who's struggling or concerned, please reach out. I offer a 30-minute free consultation. Don't hesitate. It's not about getting rid of your anxiety or depression. It's about learning the coping skills so that when those feelings arise, you know what to do.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Jillian, for hosting this event and for having us here tonight. As Jillian said, I spent time with her meeting with each one of these individuals up here, and it just was such an awe-inspiring experience for both of us to connect with them and to hear their story. And I think if you're wondering why we're here tonight, it is to hear the stories. Usually when I want to break the ice, I start off with a quote from Brene Brown, so that's what I'm going to do. Everyone has a story or a struggle that will break your heart. You would think the universal nature of struggle would make it easier for all of us to ask for help. But in a culture of scarcity and perfectionism, there can still be so much shame for reaching out, especially if we were not raised to understand the irreducible nature of human need. We can encourage our children to ask for help. However, if they don't see us reaching out for support, modeling that behavior, they will attach value to never needing help. To know pain is human. To need is human. No amount of money, influence, resources, or sheer determination will change our physical, emotional, and spiritual dependence on others. Many of us are willing to extend a helping hand, but very reluctant to reach out. It is as if we separate the world into those who offer help and those who need help. The truth is, we are both. Need is the most beautiful compact between humans. And tonight, the stories that each one of them are going to share, first of all, we're all so nervous up here. So please be mindful of, we're going to need to break the ice a couple times, I think. But them reaching out and sharing their story is saying to you that we're not alone and that you too have your own story and it deserves to be spoken. So we'll start off, and I know that we heard a little bit of Jamie and Eli's story, but why don't you share some things with us?
So when Jillian asked us to join this conversation, and she wanted us to join and really tell our story as what happened with me and as a parent, Eli as a child. It was really about telling the story as our whole family unit, because it doesn't just affect the child, and it doesn't just affect one parent. It, as we'll hear from everybody, it really affects the whole family unit. And it typically starts with the whole family dynamic. And so it's not about getting someone help typically, it's about creating a community within the family and beyond to create a bigger story and
like almost making just like a safe space at home, right? I feel like that's maybe what you're trying to say too. It's
exactly.
like, yeah, it's nice. I mean, I love when my friends reach out to me, or even me reaching out to my friends and getting help from them, but it's another thing going home and sitting down in my kitchen and just talking to my brother or my dad or my mom or my sister and just completely opening up to them, right? Because that's like your family, and that's the closest people you have to you. So it's when you lose the connection with your family is, I think, when you lose connection to a lot of things. And I think for me specifically, I think I lost connection to my family in like middle school through high school, and I think that's when I just started losing who am I, right? I think we get such a solid sense of self from our family, and when you, especially at a young age, kind of draw away or pull away from your family, you really have or at least I had a really hard time understanding who I was or knowing who I was, and I went to drugs and I went to all of these things to really give me a sense of being, even though that sense of being was small and was scary and was dangerous. It was still a sense of something that was there because my family, I felt as though it wasn't as much, which I think is what you're trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we're really here to just kind of share what it feels like to go through it, as probably many people sitting out there have struggles of their own. Maybe it's not as intense as this one was, and to know that it's normal to have feelings of feeling blue or anxiety and all sorts of things, and to kind of just start the conversation, because that's what this will be, a beginning, hopefully. Mm-hmm.
Talking to everyone tonight in this auditorium and telling my story about my sister's substance addiction, her recovery, and my family's journey is scary. But what is even scarier is seeing how addiction, drugs, and alcohol can destroy and steal who you really are, and it is a total nightmare. This is why I'm being brave and sharing my story to help others in understanding how you can become a slave to substance, chasing a lie, having it take away your relationships with family and friends, and ruining your life. I love my older sister, want to protect her, so I asked her first about sharing my story, and she gave me her blessing, knowing that if we could reach one person at a time, we can save a life. My sister Emily is 6 years older than me. When I was around 10 years old, I first started to notice how she was angry all the time, would go to her room right after school and only come out for dinner. She was disconnecting herself from the family. This was a very difficult time for all of us because she would always argue, yell at everyone, and she just wasn't herself. It felt like something took Emily away and replaced her with an anger and sadness, which I now realize was the drugs. I wanted my Emily back and to share the fun times and laughter together as sisters. The way drugs controlled Emily is something I experienced, and it was something that I did not want to be in my life. It was depressing watching the life be taken away slowly from her. Later, things started to worsen when she introduced us to this guy that she said was her boyfriend, who we later discovered was a drug dealer. He was really nice to our family, but he took a lot of her money and seemed to get angry as time went on. As situations escalated, Emily began to lose a lot of weight, and she looked too skinny, almost like she was fragile. Her face appeared like a skeleton. My parents were always present and tried everything they could to help her. Eventually, this led to Emily leaving for a rehab center in another state. One of the worst days of my life was saying goodbye and looking out the window as she left in the car towards her steps to recovery. My sister, the one that's supposed to help me dress for school, paint my nails, do my makeup, or teach me about boys, wasn't there. I was now scared of this person she'd become because of the drugs. I felt alone because it's hard to have a relationship with someone who depends on drugs and alcohol. Emily is a really amazing person. She has the brightest smile and the most beautiful hair. She makes the most amazing food ever, and her heart is full of love. She has a disease of addiction, and when she started using, everything went downhill. When I would look into her eyes, I could see the pain she had, and she wanted to stop so badly, but she couldn't. After 2 years in rehab, she is now living on her own and holding a job since this past February. Every day is a challenge, but she is determined to make a change in her life by staying sober. I'm very proud of her strength and who she has become. Even though she has hurt me, I am still choosing to support her and have her present in my life.
Awesome. Jeff. Boy, these stories are real. There's something, I hope, that no one has to travel. You know, our stories are big, they're thick, there's so much to it. Having someone, especially your own child, resort to substance as a coping mechanism, it's like being on this spinning wheel, and you're spinning and you're spinning, and she's there chasing the drug, and you're chasing her, and there's all these obstacles, and it's confusing, and it's frustrating, and you have not just her, but you have your other children, your husband, and everyone's trying to figure this whole thing out. Everyone's trying to navigate this. And it's been one of the toughest, challenging things in our lives. Emily is a beautiful person. Anyone who knows her, she would give the shirt off her back. She's amazing. I know that I could go on and on and on forever, but I want to get to the main points. Emily is a very shy individual, or was. She's actually very outgoing now. And when I look back, I feel that her journey began in elementary school, just constant rejection and not really fitting in, not really finding the friendships. And that's all she wanted, is she wanted a friend. Well, she did find that friend, and that friend introduced her to meth, and it just took off from there. How we saw this as a family, to how we recognized this, how we knew that she needed help, the mood swings, disconnecting herself from the family, rapid weight loss, associating with people that were drug dealers or people that were involved in the drugs, it was horrific, where we got to a point where we had to make a choice. You need support outside of the valley. You need to be in rehab. And with the tremendous help of Liz, I called her on the phone. I can't even remember what I asked you. But she helped guide me through this. My husband is awesome. When that time came, we worked together. We were so smooth together. And the biggest thing what we did is we put together a group of people, because at that point, Emily wasn't going to listen to us. She wasn't going to listen to our suggestions. And we put a group of friends together, people that were important people in Emily's life. And she didn't know this, and she was at a party, did not come home that night. We asked her if she could come home. There's an emergency. She came home, and lo and behold, here was like 5 great people that sat her down, talked their heart and soul, and mentioned to her, Emily, we love you very much, but if you don't make this move to rehab, you're going to die. You're going to die. And in 45 minutes, they convinced her. She just turned 18 at that time, so it was her choice, and we took that flight down to Phoenix, placed her in a rehab, and that was one of the most challenging days, saying goodbye to her, but it was also one of the rewarding days, knowing that she would get help. And that journey has gone in and out of rehab, living in a trap house, which is where drugs come in and out for 6 months, and then going down to Phoenix on Christmas and just mentioning to her, we will send you to another rehab, but it's your choice if you want to go. And if you choose not to, then we're just going to depart right now, and you're going to have to figure it out because you cannot enable. And my biggest fear was that she was going to live out in the streets, and fortunately she chose to go to the next rehab. She's been in rehab for 2 years. Currently she holds a job, which is awesome. She's living in an apartment with a friend, which is amazing. And she struggles every day. She has support when she feels like she's going to relapse, where she can call somebody and they can talk her out of it. And every day is a challenge. But like I said, the story's long, it's thick, and if anyone's going through the struggle, I'm here to help. I'm here to listen, and I'm here to help.
Hi, I'm Evie. I'm an alcoholic. Surprise. I guess I started, where should I start?
Well, you've got quite a story, girl.
I know.
I don't know.
All right, well.
Well, first I want to say that E.B. is the family engagement counselor and child welfare caseworker at Pickens County. And she has quite a beautiful story of struggle and pain, but has been extremely resilient throughout all of that. Tell us about some of your darkest days.
Sure. I started drinking when I was 16. Started smoking weed when I was 16. By senior year, I was probably drinking 5 nights a week and drinking at school. Graduated school, got a DUI, was kind of under house arrest for the summer. I never really had any rules or consequences, so I still basically did whatever I wanted. Went to college, did not do well, dropped out after they asked me not to come back. It's okay to laugh. My mom and dad divorced when I was 19, and she came out here, which is where my grandparents lived. And so for that summer, I went and lived with my sister, bless her heart. And then I moved out here and was miserable and was lonely and didn't have any connection. Got into a relationship with a guy, and that kind of was good and bad in a way that I didn't party as much because he controlled everything. We moved to Steamboat and ended that relationship, and my only real way to cope with anything stressful or really anything was to drink. And so started drinking, started doing cocaine, had a lot of access to cocaine, was really good friends with a dealer in Steamboat. Ended up leaving Steamboat because it just got real bad, and I started getting too involved with it and moved to Glenwood and had some really good days. Change of scene was really nice, but of course problems always follow you. So it just kind of continued where, the coping with alcohol and drugs was normal because that's what we did in our early 20s, and it's easy to do in a town and valley like this where basically alcohol is involved with everything fun. And so it came to time where I needed to move on and I needed to go back to school, so I went to Fort Collins, and going to school helped because I had goals and I had purpose. Still drank probably 3 nights a week. And sometimes when I was having a really bad day, I didn't go to school and went to the bar and did whatever. But went to grad school, same issues. It also school helped because I had purpose and I had structure and I had goals and I did well. And I lost a friend in grad school from alcoholism, and that I took a hit, and I I decided not to drink for a month, and it was very hard, and I was medicated, and then the day I ended school, I drank a bottle of my cousin's tequila and took a bunch of lorazepam, which you're not supposed to do, and I went to school for clinical social work, so I knew better, but I didn't care, because that's my addiction, everything that had been building up. I wanted to forget it, and that's how I did it. I woke up, luckily, and came back to Glenwood and wanted a new start, because my mom lives here and I have friends here, and I wanted to contribute to this community in this valley, and it just kind of, the spiral hit again, where I started working in a restaurant because I needed to make a living, and there weren't a lot of social work jobs here, and got sucked back into that lifestyle, and just the addiction happened, and I was drinking every day, and trauma happens that it does when you're drinking, and I was attacked by a coworker, and that continued to fuel my addiction, and started getting into cocaine again, and I was drinking every day, and usually when I was drinking, cocaine would come later, and I had a lot of access to it because it's easy. And it didn't really stop until I woke up in the hospital on May 5th, 2015, and I was told that I was going to die if I didn't stop, so I did.
I feel like you guys both talked a lot about connection, and I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that was like the biggest piece for me, for like everything was just that piece of connection. I feel like I felt so alone throughout middle school and freshman and sophomore of high school year. In the moment especially too, I think it was harder to see, but looking back, I would literally sit in my room all day and all night and just watch YouTube and just be really sad and and just so lonely, and that's, I think what happened is then high school came, or no, 8th grade came, and I think, drugs and everything came, and connection was right there with it. It's interesting to me because the times when I was lonely, when I was the most lonely, the thing that would make me feel like the most connected to somebody wasn't like going to somebody, like when I was in my real like drug phase, right? It wasn't going to somebody and just talking to them and having a good conversation. It was like just sitting with somebody saying nothing and smoking weed or whatever, right? Or doing a drug with somebody. It was the act of doing a drug gave me so much good feelings of numbing all of my loneliness, numbing all of my feelings of just self-hate and just self-loathing and just, right? And all of these just shitty feelings. It was the one thing that like really helped was just numbing all of it and just sitting with a friend and not saying anything to each other and just sitting there just fucked up with each other, right? And it's so sad. Like I get so sad looking back at that and looking at like now and sitting and, I'm not 100% sober. And I haven't been since I've been home. I think it's a process, and I think I'm still figuring it out, and I think I'm gonna still be figuring it out, and I think that's okay. but I think it's just interesting the times that I sit now, right? The times where I will be on my balcony or whatever with my friend and smoking weed or whatever, right? And think back to those times when I was super super into it and super lonely and just hated myself and how I would feel so good. And now it's like we'll go outside and smoke or whatever, and it will be. I'll feel connected because we'll be talking. I'll feel connected because my friend Jack just told me that my friend Jack's dad died 2 years ago, and he finally just told me about how he feels about it, right? Or I feel good because finally I have this situation, not because of the drugs, not because of anything, but I have a situation where I feel good enough that I'm sitting with a person in front of me who I know cares about me because I care about myself, and I love myself enough to accept that care and accept that love, and then I can share with them. And it's just, I don't know, I guess I'm just trying to share that connection to just completely strip yourself down and let everything out to somebody and having them just completely hear you will literally be the most amazing thing in my entire life until I die. I will, yeah.
Eli, you shared with me personally that there was depression. If you look back to your younger self, you, prior to using drugs, could see that you were depressed and that you were anxious and you were struggling with a lot. And I think, E.B., you had shared very similar things too, that, you know, with the divorce and the way you were raised, there was a lot of loneliness there. And when you look back on this journey to find yourself as you're growing into your teenage years and your young adult self, what are the signs and symptoms that you didn't realize then that you would realize today? Or what would you share with the audience to know, for them to know that there are, how to belong?
I mean, even for an example of last semester, this is my first year of college. So last semester was obviously my first semester of college, and it was a fucking mess. Pardon my French, but it was a mess. I mean, it was just so much struggle. I've had a lot of struggles with school anyways in my life. Like, that's been a big issue for me, and a lot of insecurities come from school for me. And so there's a lot of that, and a lot of loneliness, and a lot of drug use, a lot of it. I think since I've been home, I kind of came home and was sober, went to college, was sober. I didn't really connect to my drug self. You know, since that point, I hadn't really done drugs since I was like 15. So I went back to it and kind of saw how terrible it got again, honestly. I started smoking a little bit, started smoking every day, started drinking a lot, doing some coke, right? I was having fun or whatever, right? And then finally the end of the semester came and I felt crazy. I felt, it's hard to describe the actual feeling, but it was literally like you're on top of, I felt like I was on top of a tornado, literally just getting like pulled in, and I was trying to grab the clouds and they're clouds, so I just kept falling down. And I think the sign, it's a hard question, honestly, because it's, for me, there's a sign that I see, and it's a different sign, obviously, for somebody else, and I think for me, it's for my own feeling, my own emotions, it's when I start feeling crazy is when I know something's up, and that's more just, I think,
The important time to connect.
Yeah, just more connecting to your own emotions, but I think an external sign is, I think a lot of mood shifts. I think I can get really irritable if I'm struggling a lot. I think I have a hard time when I'm struggling a lot and I really don't want to talk about it, I have a really hard time, obviously, talking about it. And when you, especially, you obviously can say more than anyone, is when my mom comes to me and is like, hey, what's up? I will immediately just shut down and just get super defensive, right? And just push you away, which I think is what I do a lot in my life, is just push people away, which is another sign, I think. So and those are just me, but I think, yeah,
I'd like to say, too, that, we're sitting here and we're sharing our stories, and look, he's, on the other side, people would say, he went through treatment and he's so self-aware, and but it's a constant struggle for some their whole lives, and that's okay. It's having that self-compassion and that self-awareness to know when you need to not just reach for the clouds, but actually reach just for someone else to help. And I think that's the biggest piece, and that's the hardest piece when you've never gone through treatment or you've never gone through any sort of therapeutic journey, to know in yourself and know in your children when it's time or when there really is a problem. And I think for so many, I now talk to so many parents who say, oh, it's fine. He's just getting high before school, but not every day. It's fine. And I have to pause and say, okay, is that really fine? And as parents, we so want to have everything be okay, and we so want to have our kids like us. That's this generation, right? And really what these kids need are boundaries, and these kids need parents. They don't need more friends. And, right? And the more you parent, I've come to find, the better I am friends with my kids in that way, right?
Yeah.
And so but but when you are in this place and you're looking at your child and you're questioning where they are and what their needs are, it is those signs. I mean, it's the withdrawal from family. It's for Eli, he was a huge lacrosse player and a big guitar player. He stopped doing all of that. He stopped doing everything that he cared about. He stopped being friends with people he was friends with. He broke up with the relationships that were super important to him. He withdrew from me, his family, and the day that we decided to send him away, it said in the video, I mean, he looked right through me. He was cursing at me. He was telling me he would never, ever speak to me again if we sent him away. And it was that moment when I knew I had to send him away. I mean, it was in that moment of knowing that he couldn't even see me, and that there was no connection.
I mean, I couldn't see you because I couldn't see myself, right? Or I wasn't looking at myself.
But it's those signs that I would say that are so important to recognize in another person, whether it's your kid or a spouse or a friend or whoever it is.
We have a few minutes left, so it's hard because I could have a million questions. But Ibi, I want to ask you, in our conversation, you talked a lot about, you just smiled when you talked about your mom never giving up on you.
Ooh.
And I just feel like that was just like your key. And I think it's so important to be able to, as you said, set those boundaries, but also know that someone's got your back the whole time, and that communication and patience is so important. And with that said, can you speak to that, but also share with the families in this room, what would you tell them that is, what would be that message that you would want them to know based on your experience?
Communication's hard. My mom and I didn't always get along. We've both changed tremendously in the last a while, since she moved out here and I moved out here. And the thing that I would say is she started getting, in high school when I was acting up and I wasn't coming home and I was off the rails, she was very reactive, and she's here, and I tell her everything when we're very honest with each other, and so she's very reactive, and instead of being curious. Back in high school and even 20s, a lot of the focus was at my behavior and not why I was behaving a certain way, and I protected her a lot when I was using, because I didn't want to have to put that on her. And I was in therapy, a year, pretty intensive therapy before I got sober, and that was a big topic of my conversation with my therapist, is to be honest and let her know what's going on, otherwise I'll never get the support I need. And so I finally did in a Costco parking lot. I told her everything, and she listened, and right when I was able to tell her, she was able to hear me. So that was huge, and just her curiosity and her questions and her listening with empathy as opposed to reacting with anger, which is obviously a really natural thing, I'm sure, for a parent, because she was scared and she was angry, and I scared her a lot. And that communication and that honesty from both of us, once I started to get honest, my friends and my family started getting honest with me, and were able to tell me, I got sober at 29, so my 13-year run of being a manipulator and a liar and living kind of two lives, the one I showed and the one I, lived, it all improved, and that's why I was able to recover and stay sober, is because I just got honest.
Yeah, that's awesome. There was so much communication that I've had with each one of you that have mentioned that sense of belonging is so important, and we did hear from Eli about that earlier, but Ashley and Kath had always had this theme of know your people and connect to your friends. Both of them, interestingly, it was so cool. There's obviously a very strong value in their home. Kath and Ashley, can you speak to that about knowing your people through this journey, whether you're the teenager struggling, the family struggling, the individual struggling, the parent struggling?
As a 12-year-old, I didn't exactly understand what was happening with my sister. But during the struggles of the day and the nights and the arguing and her anger and her pushing away of people, what I needed to know is that my friends were there for me. Like, I had really close friends because I went to a small school in middle school, and just knowing that my friends are there to be able to talk to me is one of the best things that helped me get through my sister, because I never had a sister relationship. To me, she was just another person in the house. But now she is my sister, but knowing that there was someone to talk to helped me out a lot.
You know, this journey with Emily began when Ashley was 10. So she's 15 now, so she's grown and matured, and you know, you're just an amazing. I'm honored to have you as my daughter. So, I feel that, you know, the connections that you make are very essential. You know, the connections that you make in the community. I strongly suggest, when you're going through this therapy, talking to a counselor. Also, healing begins when you start to open yourself and you start to talk to other people that are going through this. I know probably a year after Emily had been in rehab, I put a post on Facebook, and I had, within a week, I had 50 phone calls of people in our community, and it was unbelievable, that were reaching out and saying, hey, my child has an addiction, my child is experimenting with drugs, alcohol, how can I get help? And I think when you expose yourself and you become transparent, your healing begins because you're helping other people heal. And establishing those connections and being aware that you need help. I mean, not only do I have therapy, I have all different kinds of therapy, and I have friends that I talk with that help me through this journey, and friends that are going through this journey. I have a good friend whose child died a year ago that's going through this journey, and we connect, and we're there for each other. So connections are important.
Well, thank you all for being here and sharing your stories this evening, and thank you all for listening to these stories. Let's give a round of applause to everybody and for bravery.